Greetings, fellow football managers, and welcome to Goodison Park, where we have Everton on top of the league, albeit Manchester City are 1 point back with the game in hand. We have a swimwear model who has 6 goals and is the top scorer. His stunt double is doing really well too, also has 6 goals. And we've got the poor man's Trent Alexander-Arnold lighting it up on the right flank. What on earth is going on? Now, as the thumbnail said, this is all about Everton, or a slightly weaker club relative to the league that they're playing in. Everton is expected by the media to finish 16th. Obviously, I am playing with a little bit of a mod which brings the FM24 squads into play, so it's kind of as realistic an experience as you can get, with contracts reduced by 1 year, blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's essentially FM25 on FM24. There's a good Zealand video about it. If you want to know all the details, you can download it off FM Scout. As you know, though, if you've watched this channel any amount of times, I do not do meta stuff. So this is not going to be a game-breaking tactic or something that you can download or copy directly. I just want to talk you through 2 things. Number 1, how I'm actually doing a realistic low block kind of counter-attacking tactic and getting results with it. Number 2, my broader approach to managing a slightly weaker club in terms of the tactic I use. So that's actually going to mean multiple tactics in this video. Aside from that, I'm not doing anything crazy when I go into training. I'm not doing any crazy training schedules. I've left it all automatic. The only thing I'm going to do, and there's a training video right here, is I'm adding these match reviews after games. So you're going to right click, go to match prep, and go to match review. That's literally the only thing I'm doing to change training, is I'm adding these. Okay, yeah, I am adding in a few team bonding sessions as well, extracurricular team bonding, just to keep morale up. Now, one of the big reasons you can't just download a tactic and just throw it into your team, I guess you can if they're game-breaking tactics, but generally speaking, you shouldn't be doing that, because the tactic you play might be slightly different based on the kind of players you have and the team you have. Now, looking at this Everton squad, a few players have improved since the start of the season. We are obviously 15 league games in, and we're leading. But one of the big things I noticed from this squad is you don't have anybody with any vision. Jordan Pickford, when you start the game, has vision 15, as you can see here. He's the highest vision you have in the squad. The next highest that I have right now is Patterson, who plays mainly right back. You can play him as a centre back. You can play him as a left back. In fact, you can play him in the midfield as well. Let's just have a look. Yeah, you can play him kind of right midfield as well, but his natural position is a right wing back, and that is 99% of what I've been doing with him. Right now, he has 15 vision. I think that's gone up a little bit, but don't quote me on that. For me, the best players at the start of the game were, of course, Jordan Pickford. Even though he's a raging lunatic, he's actually a very good goalkeeper, and he performs really well, especially in this kind of system. Another very good player is, of course, the previously mentioned Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who is a very solid target man. Yeah, he doesn't really have the aggression, anticipation, or bravery that you might want. His composure's a little bit lacking. Finishing's a tiny bit low. Vision and passing are definitely low as well, so he is by no means a perfect player. He's not even really a great player, but he's got pace 16, jumping 16, really good physicals, very decent first touch, good heading. You can absolutely do a job with this guy. And then you have Beto, who is almost a carbon copy of him. A little bit lower on the mental side of things, I think. But aside from that, they're almost the same player. Beto's touch is probably not as good, which makes Calvert-Lewin the starting player. And that's why he's a complete forward as well, because he can do a little bit of everything. And this tactic is going to be pretty defensive. In fact, I have a slightly different tactic. I'm going to get into that. This is kind of the main defensive one. It's, as you can see, the same thing. Doesn't really matter which one we switch to. I'll talk tactics in just a moment. But I just want to analyze players before we go in as well. In the defense, Jared Branthwaite is kind of the best one, but his marking is really low at 11. That said, his jumping is really high, so he's good in the air. Jake O'Brien, kind of the same thing. Mentals are a little bit low. Marking's not great, but he's extremely good in the air. He's also got pace. I started the season with Tarkowski. I've shifted into Jake O'Brien just because he's a little bit better in the air. If we look at James Tarkowski, obviously mentals are better. Marking's really good. But physical side of things, it is definitely O'Brien who's the better player. For me, though, the player I really wanted to build the team around was James Garner, because he's kind of an all-round footballer. He's actually, I think, the best passer in the midfield. He's got 15 passing, 14 vision. that might have improved a tiny little bit. The mentals are all really good. The physicals are all really good. This is a player who you could really use in any team, and I think he might actually be of use in any kind of squad. If you were going to buy a player from Everton, this guy might be the one you actually buy for a different team, just because he can do almost any job in the midfield. He's not going to replace the best midfielders in your team, but he's actually really good. He can tackle, he can pass, he can run around, he can do all of that stuff. So he was kind of my linchpin, and I've actually played him in all the different midfield positions on a game-to-game basis. That's also the thing when you're actually managing these tactics and these teams, you need to chop and change, maybe pull a player into a different position if you need to for that game, just to use one attribute. For example, their passing and vision, you might want him at the anchorman position rather than the box-to-box midfield position, depending on what the opposition formation is. Okay, that's enough waffling. What is my approach to playing a weaker team? Again, this team was predicted to finish 16th, which is just a little bit above the relegation places. So I thought to myself, okay, there's approximately 40 games in the league, right? Or 38. So we're going to break them into 4 10s or 4 9s. And we're going to say, okay, there are going to be 9 or 10 games that I expect to win or want to win. There's going to be 20 or 18 games, which I think, okay, I might have a 50-50 chance in. And then there's going to be 10 games or 9 games where I'm almost definitely going to be the underdog and going to lose. So, for example, Manchester City away, Newcastle away, Tottenham away, Liverpool away, Arsenal away. All of these are going to be that latter group. Then you have things like probably Bournemouth and Brentford and teams like that where you're going to go 50-50. And then you're going to have Southampton at home, which is part of your 9, which you would definitely want to win. So therefore, I have 3 tactics for those 3 different categories of games. Let's look at this one. This is my 50-50 game. My design here was going to be, this one is going to be almost my main tactic or one of my main tactics because there's just more of those 50-50 games. So the mentality, as you can see, is attacking just to have the team be more of a Mourinho kind of team. The idea was Jose Mourinho, draw them on, but then play positively, score goals with our possession as well, and be a little bit front foot, but with a team DNA of being low block and a little bit more defensive. Now, the main ingredient for low block for me, and as you can see, the cautious one is exactly the same. These are almost identical tactics, just with different mentality. The point of the low block is you need lots of men behind the ball. So this is a classic 4-1-4-1. This is the kind of formation you would get in Football Manager 2007, 2008, not 2024, right? It's very old school. It's a traditional approach, but it kind of works. And this is what you see in real life as well. Yeah, people might play a 4-3-3, but when they're defending and they've got men behind the ball, this is exactly what that defensive formation actually looks like. You've got 2 banks of 4. You've got 1 anchor man sitting in the middle, providing a little bit of extra defensive cover inside there. And sometimes you've got even the center forward coming in and becoming that 10th man behind the ball. That's why the support duty, not the attack duty. Attack duty means he will be playing a little bit higher. He'll be a little bit more isolated from the rest of the team. You might struggle to actually find him. So that's essentially the rationale of the support duty center forward up there. I do change it from complete forward to target forward, depending on a game by game, depending which player is there. So if it is, for example, Beto who's playing there, I usually shift him to target man support rather than complete forward support. I also make it target man support rather than complete forward support if I want to ensure that he stays central. Complete forward has move into channels and roam from position, which means that this guy's going to be very mobile. He's going to hold up the ball when he gets it, but he's going to move around a little bit and get himself free to receive it. That can be good, but sometimes you may not want to use it. So that's why the change. So that's something you might change case by case. Again, that's one of those things where if you just plug in the tactic and run the season with it, you're going to struggle a little bit because you might be missing out on that one little change that can make a difference in a game. And let me tell you, one little change is making a huge difference in a lot of these games. I'll get to that in a little bit. Let's look at the midfield. We do need one out-and-out attacking threat, this winger attack. He's also got closed down more because the whole point of this tactic is low block, but we want to make sure that our midfield presses and doesn't get bypassed too easily. Yes, they might get bypassed when they press and they get beaten, sure, but the whole midfield is closing down more. You can see that I've got each of these guys on close down more up here. The anchorman, I don't have it because I kind of want him to play more of an anchorman role and not really jump out as much as these 4 midfielders. And these guys here are on close down less so that they don't jump out of position and put pressure on a player and then allow them to get behind. Because first couple of games I saw that. I didn't have this. I saw the fullbacks jumping out to make tackles and then a pass going in behind them. Free winger, goal. Thank you very much. So the defensive line is closing down less. Obviously, these guys don't have it because they're at the minimum pressing intensity as it is, as you can see there, because the team pressing intensity is also slightly less often. So essentially, the center backs have the team mentality, which is pretty low, and the fullbacks are kind of on the same level as the center backs because of my custom instruction. The anchorman is on the team mentality as well. I could lower it, but I don't want to lower it too much because he does need to get out of position in case the defense gets a little bit exposed. He needs to go and make that tackle. But I don't want these guys jumping out of position and making tackles. I don't want these guys jumping out of positions and making tackles either. I'm not sure I can find a highlight for you to show it, but this instruction combined with the low block and slightly less often is actually doing an amazing job of keeping opposition wingers on the outside and just giving away corner kicks rather than letting them get those low crosses in to the 6-yard box and those little cutbacks. Those are being cancelled out by these instructions. So if you are getting hit by those cutbacks, by wingers, just getting past your fullback and cutting the ball in, putting in a low cross, the ball gets bundled in front of goal. If you're seeing that goal against you a lot, this is something that might help. But again, it's not just those instructions in isolation. It is the deep formation of the whole team. You've got 9 guys at the bottom end of the pitch, all of them sitting deep with a low block and a lower defensive line. So there's a lot of things conspiring there. Next thing is the anchorman, and this is really vital. Again, putting that guy in that number 10 spot. Otherwise, if this was just 2 lines of flat 4s, you will see a little bit of space in this area and the opposition will hurt you. You need that extra guy. The anchorman really helps out when you're playing something like a low block system because it cuts out all of that space. It cuts out the number 10 area. It does a lot of really good things. Now the defense. Why are these 2 guys in support? That has to do with actually attacking. When we are defending, when we're in our low block, when we are absorbing pressure, these guys are going to be in their positions. They're not going to try and do anything stupid because they're not complete wingbacks. They're not on attacking duty. Attacking duty wingbacks and fullbacks can be a little bit risky. They might go in for tackles you don't want them to go in, especially when you're playing a more standoff defensive tactic. So from a defensive point of view, when you want to play this kind of tactic, you want them on support. You don't want them any higher. But if you are the better team and you want to dominate a game, then obviously putting a wingback or a fullback on attack is fine. This is a more defensive team. We are more of an underdog. We want to be a little bit conservative. But at the same time, they're not on defense because when we get the ball, when we go forward, I want them to actually get up, make chances, get numbers forward. We don't want to just sit back and just stay back and be super conservative. You need to score goals to win games. So this kind of does strike the balance a little bit. You see that these 3 guys in defense are going to be the ones staying back. The rest of the team is going to get up a little bit. It's not going to get up really quick. This is your primary attacking player, this winger on attack. He's kind of going to be the most attacking one. But then you do have obviously the striker, the complete forward, even though it's support duty. This is going to be one of your primary attackers. Then you have a secondary attack structure of these guys, plus the overlapping fullbacks. Obviously, the fullback on the right side isn't going to overlap as much because he's got a winger in front of him. Therefore, he's going to cut inside quite a little bit and play that way. But that, again, it helps because you've got the 2 midfielders here. The anchorman sitting a little bit deeper. So we are able to keep possession a little bit. Going forward, that is extremely important. And as you can see, when I go to my cautious version of this same tactic, it's exactly the same. I want to create the same kind of threats. Again, it's important to score goals. To show you what I mean, I want to go show you a couple of games here. Let's go to schedule. Let's look at these last 2 games that I've had here. Looking at this Bournemouth game, you can look at the match story over here. We came out of the blocks. We dominated the game. We scored a goal right there, and Bournemouth had absolutely nothing. They started getting into the game, and in the second half, they created a few little chances, but by and large, we were the better team by far. So I was actually using my attacking version of the counter-attacking low block tactic just to be a little bit more progressive, a bit more proactive, create more chances, play with a slightly higher mentality. And the XG story played out. In fact, we probably should have scored another goal, especially around here late when we were able to hit them on the counter a lot. Why did this flat area change to this steeper stairway? That's because I actually went to my other more conservative tactic and I created more chances because I actually got them onto me a little bit more. I drew them a bit deeper and I was able to exploit even more space in behind and hit them harder on the counter-attack. That's actually why. So actually the cautious one can actually create more chances than the attacking one. It's all about the situation and what you do. Obviously, late in the game, I wanted to shore up the defenses even more. So I want to show you that game and show you exactly what I mean. Here's the goal. Anchorman passes it out to the center back and he finds the overlap. You can see McNeil cutting in, Mykolenko going on the outside, and Calvert-Lewin obviously is great in the air. He's got all the attributes you need and he scores the goal, created by the wingback. So that's why we have that wingback support along with the wide midfielder support. It's to create those little overloads, create the chance to actually get in behind, put a cross in, score your goal. So we've given ourselves an attacking outlet, which we need. And then it's all about just locking down the game. Let's look at another game. This is Aston Villa away. So in this game, I went in with my conservative tactic. You can see the match story again. We went in, we scored the early goal. It was basically even Stevens for most of the game until the late phase where they just threw everything at us and Pickford made a bunch of good saves. We got a bunch of last-ditch clearances and stuff. To be honest, if that game went on a little bit longer, we would have probably lost it or they would have got the equalizer at least. We were able to hold on because we had such a deep defense. 9 men in the box, essentially, just clearing the ball, clearing the ball, clearing the ball. We managed to pull it out. We created exactly the same XG as they did. But the attacking threat comes from a different place. Let's have a look. As you can see now, it's again on the left side. So we've got all those players on the same wavelength. And we've got the ball in behind to our attacking threat. He pops the ball in. He scored 3 goals and they've all been very, very similar. Sometimes he comes in on his left foot. Sometimes he goes on his right like that. Essentially, that winger attack is one of your attacking outlets. Just looking at the schedule a little bit more clearly here, we lost against Manchester City at home at Goodison. We've lost against Newcastle away. So again, I pointed that one out as one of the tougher games. We've beaten Fulham at home, Crystal Palace at home. We've won against Preston in the Cup. We beat Tottenham away. That was a really good counter-attacking performance. You can see this run. We've beat West Ham, Leicester, Brighton, and Southampton. All of these, for me, were in that 50-50 group, and I won it with the attacking version of the low block tactic. Ipswich, again, the same thing. I think Ipswich, I went with my attacking tactic, and then Brentford, again, switched back to counter-attacking. Nottingham Forest, same thing. A little bit unlucky on that one. And then Aston Villa again was the cautious version, the really low block. So obviously we're going into a really tough run of games here. Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, and the story of the league could be very, very different soon enough. But this kind of performance I think is really, really good for a weak team, one of the bottom 5 teams in the league, and a team without any real playmakers, any real creativity. They do have size and strength. That's something we've tried to use from set pieces. We've scored a few set piece goals. If you want a set piece video, it's up here. But essentially, as you can see, we are pretty solid. We're only conceding 0 or 1. And the times that we've conceded 2, we've been able to actually get out there and score another goal. How have we managed to do that? Let's have a look at this Brighton game. As you can see from the notable events here on the left-hand side, McNeil scored 2, both of them assisted by Mangala. And then in the second half, Brighton come back. So from the 2 other games that I already showed you, you've probably seen the same kind of pattern. So I start off with a counter-attacking tactic and they work it out eventually in the game and they're able to create enough chances to actually score a goal. Last couple of games they haven't, but in this game they did. And then I went and scored a late winner. What a game this was. Let's have a look. So this is McNeil and he's got a bunch of goals. You can see the little interplay there between McNeil and Mangala, the center midfielder, and the wide midfielder on the left-hand side, and he actually gets played in and scores. That's Harrison again. That's our primary attacking threat. And that's the reason we have that fullback on support. He can get in there and have possession. We can actually put pressure. And then again, Mangala is able to assist McNeil getting in behind. Now this is these guys. And again, we've got good positions, but that's just a world-class shot. Good goal. To be honest, we would have hoped for a block, but c'est la vie. Again, kind of passive defending here, which is kind of what I want. There was a missed tackle, and he's in and scored. That was one of the games where I thought, okay, I think Tarkovsky needs to go because he's not proactive enough. And this is that late winner. Throw in, obviously, and then Beto with the header at the far post. That is very, very nice. Now that we can look at the match story, though, look at that late surge of XG up here. How did we do that? Let me show you. Now, I've talked you through the DNA of the team, which is a low block, low defensive line, less pressing. That is constant through both of these tactics. We've also got drop off more. So those are the 4 out of possession instructions. Less pressing, low block, low defensive line, and drop off more. So very deep defending. Not as deep as it could be, obviously. We could just go there, but it is pretty deep, and we drop off. We're not letting teams play through us or get to the byline and do cutbacks. That's kind of it. But the last tactic you need when you are playing a weaker team, you do have those games, the home games against similar teams to you, where you need to go out and win. Or, as it happens, you go 1-0 down, you go 2-0 down, and you need to attack and try and score some goals. Or you go 2-2, as we just saw with Brighton, and you need to now start generating XG again. Even though you've kind of done your game at the start of the game and now it's them, you need to turn the tide. We need an attacking tactic. And this is my attacking tactic. So here, this is a complete change-up. So essentially, we've still got the anchor man in place. That is one thing. We've got the defense kind of the same. It's a wing-back, it's a full-back, both of them on support. We've got a deep defensive line. These guys are pressing less than they would be. So those are exactly the same. The anchor man is not changed either. No special instructions. So the core of the team, the defensive part of the team, is the same. Volante, however, instead of a box-to-box midfielder. Volante is kind of a box-to-box midfielder anyway, so it's almost the same thing, but he sits a little bit deeper. The wing on the right side is completely unchanged. We want him to play exactly the same, and he closes down more. Wide midfielder on the left side, exactly the same. Now, something I didn't really mention is the sit narrower part of things. It's exactly the same in these tactics as well. As you can see, he is sitting narrower in the standard tactics too. So I'm changing very, very little. Essentially, at this part of the field, the main change is the box-to-box midfielder goes back to a volante. That's the main thing. And again, why is the wide midfielder on the left-hand side sitting narrow? A big part of it is that, especially in these tactics, he's joining up. He's playing close to the center midfield on his side. You saw a few assists between Mangala and McNeil there. That's enabled by these two playing really close together. It also unlocks the wing-backs overlapping runs. So you've got a bit of an overload there. This guy can come in and join them a little bit. This guy comes in. You've got a lot of men in this side, which then makes this guy the extra man, and maybe isolate the fullback on the other side and score some goals. That's the thinking in terms of the wide midfielder. Also, McNeil as a player, when you look at this, he doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary, but he's actually got a few good things going on. He's got passing 14, technique 15, crossing 14, dribbling 13, finishing 12, first touch 14. So technical side of it is very good. He's got a little bit of vision. It's enough. Teamwork 15, work rate 15, fantastic. Really good mentals. Determination of 16 is awesome. Some of these other mentals are in a good place. Flair 14. Agility 14. Fitness, yeah, whatever. So he doesn't really fit the profile of a winger, even though he runs with ball down the left. Plays 1-2s is a really good one for more of a midfield player. So that wide midfielder rather than a winger. Knocks ball past opponent is a really tricky one actually, because he doesn't really have the pace or the acceleration for it. He does have agility for it though. He also moves the ball to left foot, blah, 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 avoids using his right foot. So very left-footed player. The main thing, though, is he runs with ball down the left. So that will make him play like a winger. If I were to now give him the instructions of a winger, so let's just go to the tactic here and change it to winger. You can see stay wider is going to happen and dribble more, which means anyway run with ball down left, because he's on the left, he's going to dribble more, so he's going to run with the ball down the left-hand side. He already has that, but I don't want him doing that all the time. I want him to occasionally think different thoughts, link up a little bit more with Mangala, link up a little bit more with Mykolenko, make that run inside, let Mykolenko go outside. So that's why he's a wide midfielder, to allow him to do those things. If I change him to an inverted winger, he's going to cut inside with ball, which counteracts what he wants to do, which is run wide with ball. So I don't want to give him that either. I don't want him dribbling that much. He's not got that much pace. His dribbling is okay. It's not great. This would just make him dribble too much because he likes to dribble as it is. So essentially, wide midfielder was the only choice where I could just let his player moves or his player traits or whatever dictate what he really does with the ball. But then from a tactical perspective, just let him, you know what, play a little bit more infield, play a little bit closer to your central midfielder. Also, central midfielder has get further forward. This is a key point. He's not a CMA. That's just way too aggressive. But he's a CM support with get further forward. So he gets up there, gets to the edge of the box a little bit quicker, plays really close to these players, and there's a little bit more interplay. And I'm able to do that because of the anchorman in behind him. So going back to where I was with this last tactic, The main thing, as you can see, it's basically a deep 4-4-2. One more striker on the field, essentially, when we're chasing a goal. And this team, this squad, have decent strikers. When we look at guys like Armando Bro over here, he's a weird player. He's got lots of jumping, lots of pace, so really good from a physical point of view. Dribbling's there, finishing's there. But look at his passing. 7, vision 10. So essentially just he gets on the end of chances and he makes runs in behind. That's essentially it. He can finish. He's probably the best finisher in the squad, but he's horrifying in terms of possession and stuff. So that's why he's not first choice, but in a tactic like this, he can come on and play this advanced forward kind of role. And this DLF, I change this quite a lot. In fact, most of the time I play it as a target forward, sometimes a complete forward. So if I move Calvert-Lewin in there and bring on Armando Broer, then Calvert-Lewin plays as a complete forward support. Most of the time, though, I put Beto in there with Calvert-Lewin, and then Beto plays target forward, Calvert-Lewin plays advanced forward, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter which one does what. There's also a couple of other interesting players. One of the ones I really like is Ilman Ndiaye. He's a little bit more of a deep-lying forward, so the DLF, I think, was for him. He was the last guy to play there. So he's more of a DLF or even a false 9. You can see he comes deep to get the ball, tries tricks, so that's more of a false 9 kind of thing. Dribbling 15 is also interesting, which is why I'm retraining him for this wide midfielder role, or rather, the right winger role, because he's very tricky, and that's kind of what you need from that player. Jack Harrison is okay, but he's not brilliant. He's got a little bit more pace than other players. His dribbling isn't insane, so that's a bit of a problem. In fact, I want a better player. If I'm upgrading, and I wanted to show you this tactic before the transfer break, I showed you my Manchester United video when I'd already made a few changes. I'd gotten rid of the Greek gladiator. I'd gotten rid of the apartment corridor gladiator. You know, I got rid of old Tom Bombadil. I dropped a few players like that from that video. It's up here. But in this case, you're seeing basically the real-life Everton team and what I'm doing with it. Another really interesting play is Lindstrom over here. He can play on the right side as well as the left side. Actually, he can't, if I remember right. If we just check out Lindstrom, left, I've retrained him, so he's retrained quite fast, but he kind of had orange on the left as well. I've essentially been playing him as a backup to McNeil. He's got a fairly similar profile. He's got a right foot, though. He does a few different things. He comes inside a lot more, but he's been pretty effective. He's scored, I think, a couple of goals as well as a substitute on that side, as that WM support on that left-hand side. So the main thing here, aside from be more disciplined, that's just part of the tactical ethos. You can see that through the other tactics as well. It's just be more disciplined. These guys don't have the creativity to be expressive, so let's just make them play the way I want to play, and things will work. And that's actually really working now that the tactics are bedding in. You can see familiarity is pretty decent. Those first few games results were bad because of poor familiarity, but now that familiarity is pretty high, we are actually getting some really good solid results. And just going back to this tactic for a second, the transition instructions again are not very different from the others. If we switch to 3, or well, 3 is a bit different, but 1, it's essentially the same thing. So again, the ethos is the same thing. I'll get to 3 in a second and tell you why it's different. But the out of possession instructions, when you are attacking, obviously need to be a little bit more front foot. You need to press a little bit higher, but that's not to say we're doing the meta thing and going, oh, you know what? I'm drawing the game. I need to chase goals, so I'll switch to a meta tactic. No, I'm not doing that. I am going with a high defensive line and a mid block. So again, that Manchester United video I linked a little while earlier has that same thing. They've got the mid block, higher defensive line, I think it was right, more pressing in order to actually get out there and aggressively win the ball, and then drop off more to actually get deep and prevent the opposition from getting in behind as far as possible. Obviously, they will give a few more chances, but this is generally a really good setup because the block is in that midfield. Formation and block is something you really need to think about. Think about where your block is and whether you have players in that area to win the ball in an effective enough manner. Again, if you're playing a low block with a 4-2-3-1, to be honest, it could work in situations, but you've got 5 players up top of the field or 4 players up top of the field. What is the point of playing a low block with 6 players or 5 players back? It just doesn't make too much sense. So think about your block and your formation and tie them together. This is why this works. You've got 9 players activating that low block, which is kind of why it works. So that's essentially one of the biggest tips I can give you in this area. And that's essentially it as well. Those are the 3 tactics. I told you I would talk about the transition. Again, this is my more proactive one. So I just wanted to dictate how we play out. We're not playing out of the defense, really. But I do want the goalkeeper not punting it long, because punting it long is risky. We've got only the 1 player there. So a lot of the time we lose that first header. In this super defensive formation where the opposition have less players back, that could be okay. because they just have less players in there to dominate our forward. In this one, where the game is a little bit more even, I want to actually get it out to feet, if at all possible. That's kind of the thinking in terms of the transition difference. So I think the most interesting thing for most people will be this tactic here. So I'm just going to leave the screen on this a little bit more. Again, it is a cautious mentality. It's discipline because the players don't really have that much expressiveness or creativity in them. This is a low creativity squad, I would say, with the highest being 15 with 1 or 2 players. Transition, again, is just counterattack and distribute quickly if possible. The keeper's a sweeper, keeper support, so he will look to distribute and he can distribute. He's got passing of 12, not great. Vision of 15, great. Kicking of 15. So he can actually distribute decently. So if he sees an opportunity, he will unlock it. Although, again, I think goalkeepers are something that Football Manager, FM25, I hope, really works on a little bit, because in real life, goalkeepers are so much more important than they are in Football Manager. You can't really get much of a difference with your goalkeepers no matter what kind of duties and instructions you give them. So I really hope goalkeepers is going to be something they're going to be working on going forward. Anyway, that rant aside, that's the meat and drink of the video. If you're still here, let's just actually take a look at the league and see what is going on. That's the form table, I think, so it's not that important. Let's actually take a look at the league table. Yep. We can see that there's no major surprises except for Arsenal, who are down in 13th. They've gone through some really bad form. Let's just take a look at their squad. No injuries. Look at that. Arsenal, well, struggling without injuries, plus their players are jaded. Oh no! What is nice to see though is that Manchester United are down in 10th. I know I've mentioned them a couple of times before, but they're quite amusing in real life as well. The management and the recent news that Dan Ashworth has been fired. It's like, wasn't he a 10 out of 10 sporting director, and they put him on 5 months of gardening leave to actually get him paid like 2 or 3 million in compensation, and now they're paying who knows how much in terms of the golden handshake. Mutual termination or mutually agreed departure or whatever basically means, mate, we don't want you to work here no more. How much money do you want to make that happen? And the guy goes, okay, yeah, pay me 5 million and I'll go now, no worries. And then they're like, okay, fine, here's 5 million, off you go, bye-bye, see you later. Obviously, if you just fire the guy and say, okay, leave, bye, he's going to take you to a tribunal and there's going to be a legal process. And his lawyer will say, hey, he had a contract which would have been worth 10 million. You are terminating this early. Pay him the monies. Obviously, I don't need to explain that very much to any Football Manager player because we've got mutual termination very accurate in that game. If you fire a staff member, generally you'll need to pay them a certain amount. But I do think that's really hilarious because there was news that they raised ticket prices quite a lot. If you look at the Manchester area or where Old Trafford is, it's definitely not Fulham. And Fulham were the example they were using. I'm fairly sure that Fulham is in a pretty posh area of London, whereas Manchester is... I don't want to criticize the area they're in, let's put it that way, but I think the ticket price would have actually hurt people, real fans. If I remember right, they were only standing to benefit like £1 or £2 million from that ticket price increase. It's like you paid Newcastle that to get Dan Ashworth, who you then fired 5 months later, and you have to pay him who knows how much more. You've been buying players left and right who suddenly are just not good for your system anymore. So they're spending tons and tons on the team. Ineos's grand plan was to come and spend tons on the team and then also build a new stadium. But then part of that grand plan was also making sure that the stadium is paid for by the taxpayers, not the club themselves. Now, Arsenal built a stadium under Arsene Wenger, and then Tottenham built a really good stadium under Daniel Levy. And neither of those clubs could spend very much on the pitch because they had to spend quite a lot on their stadia. Therefore, the performance dipped off a little bit. Ineos was going to be like, no, they wanted taxpayers to pay for their stadium. That's a very American model. That's kind of how it works in baseball and stuff like that. But I really can't believe that that would fly. You would think that Labour champion Gary Neville would talk about those things a lot more. Fair play to him if he did, but it feels like something that should get a lot more attention. But c'est la vie. We don't really want to sully ourselves with Manchester United too much. Guys, if you actually stuck around for that rant, fair play to you. Those are some of my thoughts, which I normally don't really drop. Bit more than my usual tongue-in-cheek comments, but I just find the United situation really hilarious. But there you go. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Get in touch about this video if you found at least the tactical part of it interesting and you got some value from it. That's all I want. Have a lovely weekend. Have a lovely day. Talk to you in the comments below.